بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, so in today's talk, inshallah, we'll talk about more of the relationship of the Muslims with the non-Muslims in the time of Rasulullah when Rasulullah migrated from Mecca to Medina. We talked about already how Rasulullah he made a covenant, or if you want to call him some sort of a relationship between the Muslims, the brotherhood he established among the Muslims. We talked about that last 2 weeks actually. So today we'll talk about how Rasulullah created the pact with Jews, it says, but it was Jews and the non-Muslims, all the mushrikeen as well, because the book goes and talks about the treaty with the Jews, but other books of the Seerah, they explain that the others, the non-Muslims as well, were included in that pact. And then I have taken a little bit of a detour here and talk about the relationship of the Muslims with non-Muslims in general as well, because this is one of the concept which is very misunderstood among the non-Muslims, that includes the jizya part. So I will spend a little bit more time on that part because it needs some clarity, because when we're reading the Seerah, we should have clarity on the different concepts which are mentioned in the Seerah books as well. Okay. So first we'll talk about a little bit summary. So we talked about last week about the morality in Islam, the thing that Rasulullah built the brotherhood among the Muslims in Medina. We talked about there were two groups of Muslims in Medina, Al-Ansar and Al-Muhajirun. Of course, Al-Ansar have their own tribes of their own, and Muhajirun, which is the immigrants, they had their own tribes, but they migrated in general from Mecca to Medina. And they did have the people from outside of Medina, by the way, among the Muhajirun as well. Like, for example, the example of Suhaib al-Rumi we talked about. Suhaib al-Rumi means the one from Rome. And later on we'll talk about, for example, Salman al-Farisi or even Bilal al-Habashi. Bilal al-Farisi was from Faris, meaning Persia. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. And Bilal al-Habashi was from Habasha or Ethiopia. So when we say immigrants mean it could be from any part of the world coming to Medina at that time. But most of them were from Mecca. We talked about the morality in Islam, how Rasulullah mentioned to the Sahaba about, for example, to say salam to everybody, whether you know a person or you don't know a person, or feeding the people, or keeping the ties. That Seerah section that we discussed last week also talks about the brotherhood that Rasulullah established among the Muslimin. And that also includes rights of the neighbors. Neighbors could be Muslim or non-Muslim. When we were going through the hadith last week, Rasulullah in one of the hadith mentioned that the Jibreel was coming about the rules regarding the neighbors to the extent he thought as if they will be part of inheritance, meaning they will inherit from the neighbors will inherit from each other. Okay, and then we talked about how the Muslims should be protecting each other as well. Now, today we'll talk about cooperation and non-aggression pact that Rasulullah made with the Jews. So after Rasulullah migrated from Mecca to Medina, that was needed to have some sort of a pact between the Muslims and non-Muslims as well, because now they were part of the state that Rasulullah was the ruler. Yes, he was a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but at the same time he was a ruler over the people as well, including Muslims and non-Muslims. And when Rasulullah was ruling over the people, it is important to understand the seerah aspect of it, that when Rasulullah was ruling as a ruler over the Muslims and non-Muslims, he was ruling by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Okay, while he was making judgments over the people, he did not make the judgment based on, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the reality of the situation that was presented in front of him. Okay? His judgment was based on the Quran and Sunnah, but it was not that he was ruling, like, for example, if a person is a hypocrite because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was he was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he was not treating a hypocrite, a munafiq, as a kafir, because the hypocrisy of a person is in the heart. When we say somebody is a hypocrite, a munafiq, like Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, he was the leaders of the munafiqeen at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam dealt with him as you deal with a Muslim from the perspective of dealings. Okay? So if they bring up any case to Rasulullah, they brought up any case in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made the judgment based on whatever the reality was presented in front of him. So it's a very important point that I'm trying to make here. I hope that makes sense. If not, please do ask me questions afterwards. So what comes out of that is this. After Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course we know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the messenger of Allah. He was getting wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he showed from his life how to deal with people based on what you see, not based on what's in the hearts of the people. Okay? Because you cannot tell anything about, we cannot talk about the sincerity of the people, we cannot question people's intentions. What we can talk about as human beings is what we see on the face value. This is why Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, in one of the statements he made, he said that whoever comes to us as good, we'll deal them as a good person. If he does something bad, apparently what we can see, we treat him as a bad person. What's in the heart of the person is between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope that makes sense, yeah? Okay, let's move on. So Rasulullah, when he came, so he had to have some guidelines to be set between the Muslims and non-Muslims. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made a pact with the Jews and the mushrikeen, which means the polytheists at that time as well. Now, these are the wordings that was mentioned in the book that we have in Ar-Raheeq Al-Makhtum, and these are some of the articles which are mentioned. As it says, these are the basics of the article, and it says that Jews of Bani Auf are one community with the believers. The Jews will profess their religion and Muslims their. As we talked about before, when we were talking about when Rasulullah made a brotherhood among the Muslims, he said the Muslims were one ummah, right? So they were unique ummah. Now the non-Muslims were considered as another ummah. As other books mention that it's not only the Jews of Banu Auf, but rather Banu al-Najjar, Banu al-Harith, Banu Su'ayda, Banu Jashham, Banu al-Aws, and Tha'laba. They all were part of that covenant and the treaty. And then the three major tribes of the Jews, which were Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir, and Banu Qurayda, they became part of that treaty or the pact that Rasulullah ﷺ had with the non-Muslims in general. Okay? And that included, now the number 2 point was the Jews shall be responsible for their expenditure and the Muslims for their own. So when it comes to their taking care of their affairs, they can take care of the financial issues. And each party, if attacked by a third party, each shall come to the assistance of the other. It's important to remember here another point, which is point number point number 9 has to be looked into in reference to all these points. It says, should any disagreement arise between the signatories to the treaty, then Allah, the All-High, and His Messenger shall settle the dispute. Which shows that the supremacy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam over all. Treaty has been made, but the authority at that time belonged to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the ruler over Muslims and non-Muslims. This is just a point to take care of if there is any kind of a contention between Muslims and non-Muslims. So it was just spelled out like that. But then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the judge between all. Okay, and Point number 4 is each party shall hold counsel with the other. Mutual relation shall be founded on righteousness. Sin is so totally excluded. Number 5, neither shall commit sins to the prejudice of the other. Meaning, if they are halif to each other, they are opponent of each other, but there will not be whatever kind of past they had between each other, that should not impact the relationship between them. The relationship will be based on al-bir, which is the righteousness, and there should not be any kind of ithm or sin involved in their relationships. Okay. Then it says the Jews should contribute to the cost of war so long as they are fighting alongside the believers. It's a simple, straightforward one. 8, Medina shall remain sacred and inviolable for all those joined that treaty. So whether the ones who joined the treaty at that time or the one joined later on, they all become part of the treaty, and they have to follow all the rules which are mentioned in that treaty. And number 9 we already talked about, so I'll move to number 10. The signatories to the treaty shall boycott Quraysh commercially. They shall also abstain from extending any support to them. Now, this is another important one. To know that Rasulullah ﷺ rejected the Quraysh completely. There's a boycott going on against the Quraysh. And this is hence, commercially, remember we talked about that the people of Mecca, they used to do a trade towards the north, which was Bilad Sham, for about, how much was that? 250,000 dinar. And 250,000 dinar per year was equivalent to, when we talked about a couple of weeks ago, a month ago or so, it was about, I think it was $56 to $60 million per year. This is the amount of trade they were doing towards north. Now, Medina becoming a place for Rasulullah ﷺ to have control over, and now Rasulullah is going to boycott all the Quraysh people who are going to make a trade from Mecca to Medina. That, of course, would have hurt the Meccans. And this is why later on we will see some of the battles started also. Okay? And Rasulullah ﷺ did not allow those caravans which were going from Mecca to Medina to do their trade. Okay, now, people can talk about this. What was Rasulullah ﷺ doing that he was not allowing them? Because, look, they have made the Muslims, pushed the Muslims to the point they had to leave all their belongings in Mecca because of the situation the Meccans created against the Muslims. We see that Muslims, we have very peaceful treaties as well with many people, including the Jews who were in Medina. Even though Rasulullah ﷺ in the beginning already had difficult times with them, but the peace treaties were made with them, and Muslims lived along with them without any kind of issues created by the Muslims, for sure. As we will go along the seerah, and we will see that even those things that happened between the Muslims and the non-Muslims of Medina, that was based solely of the initiation done by them. It was not that Muslims had the upper hand and now they start oppressing them. Okay? Now, moving forward, so now then it says, each shall contribute to defending Medina in case of foreign attack in its respective. And number 12, this treaty shall not hinder either party from seeking lawful revenge. So even if somebody is doing the dhulm on somebody, it's not that you will not take care of that kind of a dhulm or oppression that's been done by the other party. Okay, now, understanding that treaty, now let's focus on a couple of points. Number 1, in Islam, Islam actually gives a very clear guidelines of Muslims and non-Muslims to coexist. Okay, Islam does not force anybody to become a Muslim. This ayah that says, "La ikraha fi din qad tabayyana rushdu min al-ghayy." This ayah that there is no compulsion in deen it was not revealed for Muslims. This ayah was revealed for non-Muslims. You cannot force a non-Muslim to become a Muslim. It is not even allowed. And this is one of the incorrect concepts have been spread, especially the people who do not have knowledge about Islam, non-Muslims, that Islam was spread over the sword. As Islam does not allow to force anybody to become Muslim. It's not even allowed for us. It's a sin for us to force person to become a Muslim. Because that goes against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. And when we talk about Banu Nadir, when they were expelled from Medina, we will talk a little bit more about this ayah, because this ayah was revealed for them. Because some of the people were trying to force some of the children who were with the Yahud to become Muslim. And the ayah was revealed that you cannot force anybody to become a Muslim. Okay? So this ayah is not for Muslims. Unfortunately, sometimes we think of it this, if a brother or sister is asking, let's go and pray, or you cannot force me to pray. He's not even, you cannot force, a person cannot force anybody, individuals cannot force each other anyways. But if there is a state and people are not fulfilling their obligations, in that case, of course, whether you are living in an Islamic state or you're living in a non-Islamic state, the state comes in and makes sure that you follow the law. Right? If somebody doesn't want to pay the taxes here, the government will come after you to collect the taxes. Or somebody has an accident, then state will intervene and make sure that the right of one is not taken by the other, or vice versa. So that's more about to understand that we cannot force somebody, but if Islam state is there, that a person is not fulfilling his obligations, or he is committing some crime, then of course the law will be applied on them. Okay, but that's not this has nothing to do with this compulsion in deen or not compulsion in deen. That's enforcement of the law. That's different idea. Okay. Now, when it comes to the protection of the non-Muslims, there are many ahadith on this subject. I just put some of them here. Like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Man qatala mu'ahidan lahu dhimmatullahi wa dhimmatu rasuli lam yarah rahihatul jannah." The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whosoever kills a person who is under a covenant." Under a covenant, meaning like we just talked about. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a covenant with the Jews and the non-Muslims. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if somebody kills a person who's under the covenant, then he who's under the protection of Allah and His Messenger will not smell the fragrance of the Jannah. And when we talk about the fragrance of the Jannah, you can smell the Jannah from the distance of 70 years. Not talking about even seeing the Jannah or something. Just the smell, it has so much fragrance, and that person will not be able to even smell the fragrance. This is, subhanAllah, this is more for emphasis, so we understand how big of a sin that is. So Muslims are not allowed to. On top of it, if somebody does that, he will be taken care of by the state. The state has to make sure that the justice has been provided in case somebody has done that. Similarly, Rasulullah ﷺ said in another place that diya, the blood money of the Jews and the Christians, is like the Muslim diya. It's not that you say, oh, if a Muslim has been killed, it's different than a Jew or a Christian. No, it's the same thing. Blood money, if it will be applied, it will be the same blood money will be applied for the Jews or the Christian and the Muslims as well. Another place, Rasulullah ﷺ said, okay, so this that's talking about is that the Messenger of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a typo here. This hadith is incorrectly mentioned here. If the hadith was about this, if somebody kills a person, a mu'ahid, then Rasulullah said, I am most noble of those who will fulfill the dhimmah, meaning to take care of the dhimmah of those people who are under the protection of the Islam. Okay. So this one should be taken out. Okay. And the hadith, he who harms a person under covenant or charge him more than he can, I will argue against him on the day of judgment. Rasulullah made sure that nobody is forced to take extra taxation from the non-Muslims. That we'll talk about next in the next slides. That what does it mean by this taxation that we're talking about non-Muslims? Okay, and it's not allowed to force them to take more than what they're supposed to be giving. And if that's the case, Rasulullah said he is the one who will be arguing on his behalf on the day of judgment. Or if somebody harms him, Rasulullah will be the one who will be arguing on his behalf. Now, before we go to the jizya, I want to bring it up that how Islam actually provides the justice to the people. This example, probably most of us heard it here or there. in the time of Ali radiallahu anh, when Ali was the Khalifa, and one of the Jews, he stole his armor. Now, Ali radiallahu anh, he saw that his armor was with the Jew. He recognized it. He took it to the Qadi, or the judge. Qadi Shuraih is one of the most famous judges that we can find in Islam. And when Ali radiallahu anh presented his case to the judge asked for witnesses, and Ali was not able to provide the proper witnesses. And the judge, even though he knew Ali was the Khalifa at that time, the head of the state for the Muslims, he gave the ruling in the favor of the Jew. Because the principle in Islam is this, that if, for example, there's a remote control here, it belongs to whoever, and it's in my hand, and I say this is mine, then because it's in my possession, it is mine. Somebody else who says, no, it's not, it does not belong to me, has to prove it. He has to bring the evidence. We do the things based on evidence. Okay? So same way, in the case of that Jew who had the armor of Ali, it was in his possession, so Ali had to prove that it belonged to Ali. Ali was not able to establish the evidence, hence the ruling was given in the favor of the Jew. And Jew was so much amazed by the justice of Islam that he actually accepted Islam after that. And Ali radiallahu anh gave that armor as a gift to the Jews. But the point is, when it comes to the justice in Islam, it does not look at what religion a person belongs to, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, Jew or a mushrik, it doesn't matter. The justice has to be provided. Now, when it comes to the yes, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when you are it says when the death approaches any of you and you make a wasiyah, then the testimony of two should be taken. Now, it says from the believers among you. It says because it says اثنان ذو عدل منكم أو آخر من غيركم. Either the two from you, Muslim, the adl, or from the غيركم means here غيركم means the non-Muslims. So you can have non-Muslim witnesses as well. So Islam allows to have Muslim or non-Muslim witnesses, and they are equal when it comes to judiciary. You will not be saying that because he's a non-Muslim, so his witness is not acceptable. And this is what the scholars say about this. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he's talking about غيركم, it is referring to non-Muslims. Okay, now moving to jizya part, because that's connected to the covenant and if the non-Muslims are living under Islam. So this is one of the most misunderstood concepts that exists among the non-Muslims. Whenever people talk about jizya, they thought of it as somebody is coming with the swords and is just chopping the heads off and collecting the money as much as they can from the non-Muslims. That's incorrect. There's no reality to that. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يحرمون ما حرم الله ورسوله ولا يدينون دين الحق من الذين أوتوا الكتاب حتى يعطوا الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون. This ayah is the one which is the evidence from the Quran to collect the jizya from the people that are non-Muslims and they are living under you. Okay? Now, when it talks about this is the evidence for that. But what is jizya? When it comes to jizya is a tax. It is applied to all mature dhimmi. Dhimmi is a term which is used for non-Muslims who are living under Islam. So in the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he moved to Medina, the people Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the pact with, who were non-Muslims living in Medina, they will be considered as dhimmi. Dhimmi means they are Ahlul-Dhimmah. Now they are under your protection. You have to provide the protection and security to those people. So Islam provides security to non-Muslims in that case. But it only applies to male who are capable of giving the jizya. And I'll talk about the tax also. What is that? So it is taken from them to provide them protection. It's a type of a tax. Now, of course, the Muslims are not the one. If any of them become Muslim, they don't have to pay it. Now, it can be said, oh, well, so you start taxing the people so much that to relieve themselves from the tax, they became Muslim. Somebody can say that way, right? But that's not the case. When we look at the numbers, which are the jizya numbers that Muslims were collecting, they were no more close to what Muslims in general pay in the zakah, for example. Okay? Now, and first of all, it does not apply to children, does not apply to the women, does not apply to anybody who is handicapped and does not even have enough wealth. It does not apply on him. In the case of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was the second Khalifa of Islam, there was a blind man, he was begging. And when he saw him, he asked him, why are you begging? And his response was, because when he was young, he was able to pay the jizya, and now he's old, he does not have enough to pay the jizya. I believe he was blind also. So Umar ibn Khattab, when he found out, right away he commanded that he should be taken care of by the Baytul Mal, from the treasury of Islam. He said because when he was young, he was paying the jizya, and now he is not capable, hence we should be taking care of him. That's number one thing. He did not stop there, Umar. And that's the beauty of the justice in Islam also. Umar commanded the people, the one who were working, that go and find out if there's anybody else who's in the same status, the same state. And he should be getting a stipend from the state as well. It's not like that, oh, somebody has to go in the lines and file the unemployment or this or that, and then, no. Umar al-Khattab understood it very well. This is on his neck. Hence, he has to find out who's in need. And you will find many examples of Umar al-Khattab's life. Like, for example, let me see the time. Okay, so you find many examples like this, that Umar was used to patrol during the night time. Yes? This is like in the sections of Umar al-Khattab's seerah, you'll see a whole section is about this. Why was it this? I mean, when I was talking about the subject somewhere else, whenever I read about Umar's life like this, you feel like you have to be a crazy person just walking during the night time. Of course, Umar was not crazy. That's another point I'm making here. That's the idea of sense of responsibility Umar had. He understood he's accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That did not allow him to sleep during the night time. So he was walking during the night time to make sure if there is somebody he can find who is in need, so he can take care of him. Any of you heard the story of a woman who was cooking something in a pot? You heard, but it was nothing in the pot, it was just the rocks. She was boiling in the water to make sure that kids go to sleep. We hear this story all the time. There was one very important aspect of that story, which I find people miss it. And I'll just talk about that part. So I will not take too much time. So the woman said to Umar, and she did not really recognize him as he's the Amirul Mu'mineen. She said, Allah will hold Umar accountable on the Day of Judgment. That we and the state. That she did not have enough to feed to her kids. Umar said, how would Umar know? He did not disclose that he was Umar. He was Amirul Mu'mineen. He said, how would Umar know your situation? And her response was, when he took this job, from there on, that's his responsibility to find out what state we are in. See, it's a very different state of mind, what Islam teaches us. And that's what Islam teaches us, and that's the way Islam is supposed to be. Okay? Now, going back to the jizya part, so talking about the jizya of Umar took care of that person who was begging at that time. So that shows that, first of all, jizya is not an oppressive kind of a tax. Second, you will see the numbers. In the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, look at these numbers and you'll be surprised at how small of an amount is that. First of all, this is a yearly amount. Okay? In Yemen, it was used to be only 1 dinar of gold. And this is, I just Googled it, what's the price of 1 gram gold. Today it was $48.62 per gram. So I just looked into, okay, what does it mean? It means that people from Yemen, they were paying 1 dinar per year. And it's not people, it's only the male person of the family. on his head. Okay? And then that 4.25 gram, because one dinar is equal to 4.25 gram, and you multiply by $48, it becomes $206, right? And then in the Egypt and Sham, you see he categorized the people into different categories. The people who are rich, the middle class, and the worker class. And the rich, they were paying 4 dinar, the middle class 2, and worker 1. And Omar was asked, why is it like that? And Omar's response to them was, because of the kind of a wealth these people have. So Sham, or the Byzantine Empire, the Muslims opened at that time, or the Egypt was also part of the Byzantine when the king Muqawqis, basically when Muslims opened the Egypt, it came under the rule of Islam. These were part of the Byzantine Empire. They were rich people at that time. So hence it was very easy for them to pay this kind of a jizya. So the rich people was $826 per year. Okay? There's a brother I know who's going to be making, for example, from February, $4,000 because he's graduating. Now, it happened to be, he told me. Whoever it is, I'm not mentioning his name. So the point is this. He doesn't know that $104,000 means he'll be paying at least 30% of will go to taxes, right? And if you're not married, it goes to 35%, pretty big number. And out of 100,000, 30,000 is just gone, flat. You don't even see. You don't even get a thank you letter from the state that, oh, thank you for paying $30,000 per year. And then when you buy something, you pay a sales tax. You buy a car, you pay tax. You buy a house, you're paying a property tax, isn't it? Or you just pass through the tollway, you're paying taxes. So that whatever you make, it's about 40 to 50% is just paid in taxes. And now, look what Islam is saying. He's paying, the maximum, biggest number that you're seeing here is $800, $826 per year. Now compare that to what people pay today. It's nothing, right? Okay, now, they don't pay the zakah, by the way, non-Muslims. Muslims have to pay zakah. So if a person, let's say, he has some gold whatsoever and property and all that, $100,000. Now he has to pay $2,500 that year. And that's the zakah on it. Besides that, people do the sadaqah and all those things in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So see how different it is. And it's not for, when it comes to zakah, zakah is not only on male. Zakah is on the male, female, and according to one of the understanding, Ahnaf do not believe that, but the Shafi'i, they say it's on the children as well. If a child has wealth, he has to pay zakah as well. If he exceeds the nisab, of course. Nisab is the threshold that you have to have. So the point I'm trying to make here is, and not going into the differences of opinions and all that, of course, you can go according to the opinion that you understood and you believe that's correct. But point is, when it comes to non-Muslims, they were not paying as the society and all this misinformation out there about jizya is. And 800 was a max. Then you can see middle class from Egypt and Sham were paying $413, which is two dinar. And the worker class was paying 1 dinar. And if somebody is poor, cannot do it, he was taken care of by the state. And not like that he has to go in the lines. Not in a way that if somebody is homeless, then he has to go to the shelter on a daily basis. With all his belonging, go to the shelter, wait, get in, and then you have to be kicked out after a certain time in the morning, and until the night time, you have to be wandering around the street again with all the belongings. This is what the shelters do, by the way. If somebody wants to look into this information, of course, you can go back and check it out how it works. My point is this. Islam is really a mercy for the mankind. That's what I mean by وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةٌ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The deen Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, that's a real mercy for the mankind. Even the thing that people try to portray as negative about the Muslims or the Islam, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it doesn't really matter what the people say for us. Okay? So and you can see Iraq, people were not as wealthy and affluent as in Sham and Egypt. They were paying much less than that. Okay? So as you can see, the middle class, actually I messed up. The first one is not everyone. First one was rich, second was middle class, and third one was worker. That's what happens when you do copy and paste, right? So, so that's the rich class was paying $99 per year, and the middle class was paying $49.98, and middle class was $24.99. I'm just converting it from the dirham because dirham is a different kind of a coin than the dinar. Dirham is a silver coin. It is 2.975 gram, and each a per gram rate today was 70 cents per gram in silver. Yes.
Did non-Muslim residents have to pay jizya in both gold and silver?
So the gold and silver was the currency at that time, and in Islam, it's supposed to be gold and silver or something backed up by gold and silver. Okay, and you can imagine what kind of a revolution can come if it's just you convert the money to gold and silver. And today, whoever has power, they can print as much money as they want. If you don't have power, then you are the one who will feel this inflation if you print extra. Right? Okay, so when it comes to currency in Islam, it goes back to gold and silver. And by the way, it's until very late, I think the early 70s, even the United States broke away from their backup of gold from the dollar, and then became petrodollar. And the rest of the world, it used to be in general, it's a very new concept that we talk about. You have petrodollar, or everything is connected to a petrodollar. It used to be all gold and silver, or some intrinsic metal. So when you have it's intrinsic metal is the one that you are linking your currency to. It cannot have inflation the way we see inflation today. And I think everybody feels inflation at this point. At least I do, man. I'm not that rich. Okay, so that's about the rates. Now, overburdening by jizya, like as I was saying, there are hadith that talks about it. One of the narration that talks about that Abu Najih, who said, I said to Mujahid, what is the matter with the people of Asham who pay 4 dinars and people of Yemen pay 1 dinar? You saw that previous screen here, right? That Yemen was paying 1 dinar and the rich of the Sham were paying 4. So that's the question he asked. And he said, this was decided based on the prosperity. Prosperity because the people of Sham had more wealth compared to the people of Yemen. So you can see that somebody who has, I'm just throwing a number, somebody who has $10,000 in his account, if he pays $10, is different than if somebody who has $1,000, you take $10 from him. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I mean by that. It's racial-wise, the prosperity was the main issue. Okay, and then there's another hadith that says that Rasulullah ﷺ said, he who harms a person under covenant or charges him more than he can, I will argue, we talked about this hadith already. And then when collecting the jizya, this cannot be collected by abusing and torturing the dhimmi as well. As I said, right? This is one of the misconceptions out there. Because Rasulullah ﷺ said, I bear witness that, Hisham bin Hakim said, I bear witness that Rasulullah ﷺ said, Allah will punish those who punish the people in the dunya. Talking about the punishment mean by torturing. Okay? Not talking about punishment system. So that's about that when we talk about Q&A now. Okay, so if there is any questions about the subject that was covered. I know I went a little bit away from the seerah itself, but I took the section of the seerah which was important, that how Rasulullah ﷺ was dealing with the non-Muslims in Medina. And then to give some examples so we can understand and we can correlate to some of the things which have been mentioned about the Muslims and the Islam which are incorrect, so we should have the answers for these. Okay? So we should not be overwhelmed by when people come and throw questions at us that, oh look what Islam was spread because on the sword, was the taxation on them, and blah blah blah. But the reality is this, right? Go to Muslim lands where Muslims were ruled by Islam. Okay, Indian subcontinent was ruled by Islam. It's still, if you combine the whole Indian subcontinent, which is India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, or if I want to include Sri Lanka, the majority of the people who live there are non-Muslims. The percentage-wise, if you look at them, majority is still non-Muslims. Same thing you can see in Lebanon. Not necessarily the majority, but there's a big population of Maronite Christians, for example, there. In Egypt, and this is over the centuries people have been living there. In Egypt, there are Coptic Christians over there. Iran, you still have people who are fire worshippers, the people who are Jews. Same thing where you can look into Palestine, you can look at Jordan, and on and on and on. All those places where Muslims rule, it's not that they were wiping out non-Muslims or something. The only exception to the case is the Jaziratul Arab, because of the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But over there, it was not that they were wiped out or something. They were given time. So that's all I want to talk about today. But if there is any questions or comments about what's discussed, inshallah, I will try to answer.